This is Reverend Claudia. And I would like us to just bring ourselves into this space by taking a deep breath in of the beautiful life force energy that flows through us every second of every day. And then releasing that breath and releasing tensions, thoughts, worries. Inhaling in again, feeling that energy flow into our body, into our heart space. And let's just focus with our mind's eye into that heart space as we feel it enlarge within ourselves and come to rest in this space, in this moment. Let's just take another few nice breaths in and then release them, relaxing ever deeper into this space, into this moment. Divine One, God of all that is, we come together this evening as interfaith ministers, ready and willing and able to do your will. As we gather in this circle, let us go deep within and find the wisdom and share that wisdom within this circle so that a greater collective wisdom can be created. We give thanks for this opportunity to be here together, for the kind, loving souls that are here and all over the universe. As we move through this circle, have us hear what you would have us hear and say what you would say and be who you would have us be. And so it is. Amen. So I will hand this over to Joran. Joran, go ahead.
Thank you, Claudia. Thanks so much for having me. And it's really an honor to be able to facilitate these calls. This is now the third in a series of calls we've done. The first one being what seminary doesn't teach you, and we took a focus on leadership and how to get people to step up into leadership roles and volunteer and lead small groups or volunteer for committees. And then the second call, we talked about what it was like to start a spiritual community from scratch and from the ground up. And that was, I think, a really great one because there are a lot of us actually doing that work and trying to grow the communities that we're leading from, say, 5 people to 10 people or from 10 people to 100 people. And that was a really great one as well. And now tonight, here's back to talk about creating interfaith rituals, which it's near and dear to my heart. And we do a lot of them down here in Florida. And it's going to be great fun to kind of unpack a little bit and share what we've done down here, but also to hear from all of you and to hear what we're doing kind of around the world as interfaith ministers and activists and chaplains and leaders. And that is the goal of these calls, is to get everybody in a room together as leaders and builders of community, and so that we may share from one another and learn and support one another in new ways that kind of stretch us out of our comfort zones at times and get us thinking thoughts that we normally wouldn't have if we hadn't reached out and connected with a network of other interfaith ministers, of like-minded people. And so that is the goal of the Interfaith Ministers Network and the goal of these calls. And so I do encourage you to continue to register for these calls as they happen, sign up on the mailing list, and like Claudia mentioned, go to the Wisdom Circle website and check out the resource. The page that we're building there contains links to books and videos and movies and all kinds of teaching tools online and websites that can help you as an interfaith minister build curriculum, build services. There's sermon ideas. There's links to, green activist websites, volunteer organizations, interfaith recovery groups, all kinds of stuff that you can use that's now at your disposal. And so we also rely on you to help us build and populate that page. So please keep reaching out to Tammy or to Claudia through the Wisdom Circle website to submit your links to that page, and then we'll add them. And the resource will can continue to grow and be a value to people who can then come into the circle after us. So thank you again for everybody who's here on the call tonight. My name is Joran Oppelt, for those that maybe haven't been on the previous two calls. And what I do down here in St. Petersburg, Florida, and all over, really, I'm an author and an interfaith minister and now a recently certified life coach and musician and marketing professional and a creative director and a dad, and so I'm pretty active, and I do a lot of things down here. One of the things that recently, I was previously a chaplain at a Unity church here in St. Pete for a few years, and then 3 years ago branched out on my own and started my own integral church down here. And we meet once a month outside under a beautiful triangle of trees in a city park. And we also meet once a month indoors in a chapel over on the west side of town in a UCC church that gives us access to their chapel once a month. And we also have a book club, and we also have regular ongoing classes and workshops and ecstatic dance and drumming and all kinds of other things that we do in the community, including a huge art and music festival that's coming up that I'm currently in the middle of planning. It's called Alchemy Fest. It's coming up at the end of April. That's a free event that's open to the public where hundreds of people come, and there's 2 music stages, and I have an amazing event committee that helps me put that on. And then in September, at the end of the year, we do something called Interfaith Week. And so that's where we get a lot of the religious leaders from the community around the table to participate in dialogue that they normally wouldn't have, and to really lead by example and show not only their communities but their other communities, sister communities, how to act pluralistically, as Sandra was saying, showing people that it's okay to keep and maintain and even deepen your own beliefs, but then sit with someone else in conversation about what it is they believe. So Interfaith Week is another great thing. So I would love to get into, before we talk about creating interfaith rituals, I really think it's important for us to kind of define what it means when we say interfaith, especially in the context of ritual. And so I'm sure we're all familiar with terms like ecumenism and interfaith and interspirituality and pluralism. And I want to just kind of dig into a little, just real briefly, get into maybe the slight differences between all of these. Obviously, ecumenism is a strictly Christian term most times, and it refers to different faiths within the Christian philosophy. So various Christian structures, but that all have a Christian basis. Interfaith, we can take to mean different faith structures, including the diversity within the individual faith traditions. So you're talking about Shia Muslims alongside Sufis, or you're talking about evangelical Christians alongside Unity and New Thought and metaphysical Christianity. And you're talking about Judaism alongside Kabbalah, right? So interfaith combines, or is where those religious structures meet and sometimes intersect, as they engage in pluralistic dialogue. And then interspiritual, most times, means the kind of unitive experience, the unity in diversity and the unity of spiritual experience or expression within these faith traditions. It's usually referred to as the kind of more inclusive or mystical sections or segments of these religious structures. And so I want to take a minute and pause. And Charles, do you have that definition of interfaith that has been sanctioned by Houston Smith's daughter? Do you have that ready to read to us?
I don't have it handy.
Okay. I'd love to hear it. That's okay, and maybe you can paste it in the notes if you find it later, or email it in, and we can put it on the site. But I think it's important to note that everybody has a definition of these terms. The other thing I think we need to really kind of keep in mind is the difference between, especially as you get into ritual and you start to combine language and cultural expression and faith expressions, the difference between syncretism and pluralism. And this is something that we're really conscious of, especially at Integral Church, because what we want to do is keep the specific individual faith traditions intact and not kind of put them in a blender. And so syncretism would combine language. You might hear the term Christ consciousness alongside or in the same breath or sentence as the term divine feminine. You might hear Native American teachings right alongside Buddhist teachings, again in the same breath or same sentence, combined in what's called a syncretic way to put out a new expression or a new structure, as opposed to pluralism, which we've said keeps those traditions intact. And as you move in your ritual or in your service or in your ceremony from one teaching or tradition to the next, there's a definite, palpable, tangible sense that you are now hearing from a different teacher or from a different philosophy or from a different worldview or perspective. And so I think it's important to kind of differentiate those, because a syncretic ritual or a combined, blending language together, especially in the case of like a wedding where a couple, I'm sure we've all run into this, they aren't necessarily religious and they don't really care what language we use. They just say whatever is fine, we just don't want to hear a lot of Jesus this and Jesus that, but the word God is okay, and they kind of leave it up to you to craft, the invocation or the vows as how you see fit. And in that case, a little bit of syncretism can go a long way in creating something that is really beautiful and meaningful and resonant for the couple and for the families, and that's okay. But as far as interfaith services and interfaith rituals, I always personally put a real emphasis on keeping things pluralistic and separate. The importance of ritual, I think we've already talked about. I mean, down here, I just sent out our survey to our community, to our members, quote unquote members, and I tell you what, we asked them, to rate things on why they're attracted to spiritual community or what they want to get out of spiritual community. We can, options like being connected to others, or being in service to others, or spiritual direction, or religious education, or religious literacy. And in that list of things, in that laundry list of things, was the word ritual. And ritual rated, I want to say, surprisingly high. I want to say about 40% of the respondents said that ritual was important in their lives. And so for us, for Integral Church in St. Petersburg, Florida, which consists of, I want to say, a large segment of people who would consider themselves agnostic or spiritual but not religious, or spiritually independent or progressive, I think that says a lot, that people are still seeking ritual in various forms. Ritual can be many things. Ritual can be your daily, your morning meditation practice, or it can be any kind of shamanic practice that you have. It can be anything in your life. And so I found those answers interesting, and I wanted to read something actually that is in our Integral Church Handbook. It comes from a textbook called Rituals in Families and Family Therapy. It was published in 1988, and there's a section here on the importance of ritual, and it defines ritual as such. I'm just going to read the excerpt for you. Rituals are co-evolved symbolic acts that include not only the ceremonial aspects of the actual presentation of the ritual, but the process of preparing for it as well. It may or may not include words, but does have both open and closed parts, which are held together by a guiding metaphor or a shared meaning. Repetition can be a part of rituals through either the content, the form, or the occasion. There should be enough space in what they call therapeutic rituals for the incorporation of multiple meanings by various participants, as well as a variety of levels of participation. And I want to kind of emphasize that last line because I think it's important for people to be able to opt out of the ritual, especially in a group setting. You know, if it's your personal practice, you're not going to opt out. You're just going to skip it, and that's fine. I guess you have opted out if you skip your practice. But the importance of being able to sit in the back pew and simply observe, watching the ritual unfold, connecting with a ritual objectively before connecting with it intersubjectively, I think that's important, especially for people who are coming into interfaith settings where they may not be completely familiar with what the heck is going on. You know, it might feel a little scary. They might feel a little vulnerable, especially if the ritual involves opening up and sharing, you know, verbally sharing with people, in some cases strangers. And so I think that to build into these rituals the ability to, you know, not approach not approach and take communion, you know, or not have to stand up and sing in unison with everybody. You know, my wife specifically is uncomfortable with being put on the spot and told to sing or told to say or repeat something, and that's totally okay. She's appreciating that ritual in a different way. And I think it's just as valid and sometimes just as meaningful in different ways. And I think here they go on to describe 6 key aspects to ritual, so 6 different dimensions to ritual. One of them is, as they've mentioned already, repetition. So repetition not just in action, but also of the content itself and of the form of the ritual. So if the ritual itself repeats or has pieces that repeat. Acting is another one. So not just saying or thinking something, but doing it, right? Enacting or embodying something that has larger meaning, acting it out. Special behavior or stylization. This is where behaviors, symbols are set apart from their usual common uses. So a symbol like a cross might take on something completely different as far as meaning when used in ritual. And that could be true for all religious symbolism and symbology. The order, so the order and structure, so having some beginning and some kind of ending to create a containment in order for spontaneity to occur. There has to be a vessel or a vehicle for this spiritual experience to arise built into the ritual. An evocative, this is funny, an evocative presentational style where through staging and focus an attentive state of mind is created. And then lastly, they say the collective dimension where there's shared social meaning. So a lot of this sounds like theater, right? A lot of it might sound like, oh yeah, it's acting and it's all about style over substance. And I suppose that to some degree, you could say that there are some similarities between ritual or ritualized practice, I should say, and theater. This is really spiritual theater that we're talking about. The important thing to remember, though, is you can have this ritual in place even on your own. When you wake up and you greet the sun outside your window, or you get out of bed and you look at the vision board that's hanging on your mirror, or whether you have a specific mantra or prayer that you do in the mirror to yourself, with yourself every morning, that itself is ritual. And the observer of that stylized embodiment is you. You're observing yourself in that moment and connecting with yourself, which in a way is connecting with spirituality in the deepest way, the most perfect way, the most appropriate way we all know how to do, and that is our own way. So there are kinds of rituals that I think we should probably get into, and I want to remind everybody at this point that if you have any questions, as I'm moving through these descriptions of ritual and citing specific examples and telling these stories, if you have any questions or anything that comes up for you and you want to share, just go ahead and hit 1 on your phone or raise the hand in the social webinar. So the kinds of rituals that I want to make a distinction between, there are going to be small rituals, like 1 to 5 people. That's ranging from our personal daily practice. I have a friend down here, Ashley Smith, who provides sacred tea ceremony for individuals and couples and large groups. It's one of the top. It's probably in the top 3 meditative experiences I've ever had in my life, participating in the sacred tea ceremony facilitated by her. It was simply amazing. And the ritual that takes place with her, the movement of her hand as she's sweeping it in a figure 8 between the cups that are on the floor, and as she's slowly and deliberately pouring the tea in, and the speed and the rate at which she's repeating, and everybody's drinking the very hot tea, and in the beginning it's very hot and it's hard to swallow, but you swallow it down, and she pours them again, and you drink them again, and there are moments of rest and there are moments of activity, and it's all silent, and it's one of the most beautiful rituals I've ever seen. Weddings are another one. We've talked about weddings. When we do a consult with a couple for weddings, I always have a list of questions. That is, what language do you want to include, but also what language do you want to avoid? In the interview process, I always ask the couple about maybe the religious backgrounds of their families, and if there's anybody that they would want to include, out of respect, elements or aspects of a specific faith tradition in the ceremony as a connection with their ancestors, as a connection with their family and the community that is now going to be a part of this bond and this covenant that they're now entering. And it gets them thinking in ways that is, we're creating a new family, but we are part of a larger combining of traditions, and that's always fun. And interfaith weddings are always great fun to plan because, we've blended elements from Buddhism and hand fasting and all kinds of different faith traditions in the weddings that we've done here. Baby naming ceremonies, as Claudia mentioned, is something that we've done here as well. I've done one for my son. We did a baby naming ceremony in our backyard, and we invited friends and family. It was very small, very intimate. And we had his head anointed with oil, and there was an invocation by my mother-in-law, who's a yogi and an Ayurvedic instructor and practitioner. And there was just some nice moments with the family gathered around and really claiming this new life and honoring this new life for coming in and claiming us as his family, and these were beautiful, beautiful moments, and they were punctuated by the ritualistic structures that we put in place and just kind of made up. We consulted ahead of time and said, okay, we've got these 3 or 4 things we want to include. So let's do them in this order, and let's try it and see how it goes. My previous child, we did for her what we called, jokingly, a baptism in our kitchen sink, where we just ran some water over her head, and we covered her in rose petals, and we said prayers for her and honored her. And so there are various ways you can do baptisms or baby naming ceremonies. We also, for the fathers, dads-to-be, I have a men's group called the Brotherhood of the Owl, and we go out in nature, and we take the new dad, the father-to-be. This is more a rite of passage, that we take him out in the woods, and we basically surround him. We put him in the middle of the circle. We start a fire, and there is a specific flow to this thing that has evolved over the last 10 years. There's a specific ritual that we have built around new fathers in our community where we share, and I want to say pour into him the wisdom, the experience that we have as fathers. We share with him the things that we wish that someone had told us when we became a father. And I think it's specifically important to have rituals and rites of passage in place for young men. I think our culture is seriously lacking in rituals for young men, for men in general. And I think that it's important to have those in your community and to have them be intergenerational and for there to be elder men in the circle. Too often I see young men together for things that are called, the man shower or the, whatever else they call it. And it really just kind of turns into a party, which is, it's fine, has its place and has its time. But I think that a serious ritual, a serious rite of passage that demarcates a transition from the person you were before you became, spiritual head of the family or leader of the tribe or the clan. These things are important, and I think that it's important that we talk about them in those terms. The other thing is at the end of our life, as we've mentioned, we have the memorial service or the celebration of life ceremony that we've done. And those are, I've done a handful of them myself, and I want to say those are typically Christian. In my experience, I've had a typically Christian families who've come to me that maybe have moved out or maybe just aged out of their church community, and they didn't have a church that they were attending regularly, and they had maybe gotten word of me through friends or friends of the family and asked me to step in to facilitate, and it was an honor to do it. But I admit it was, it is strange to do that for somebody who you do not know. And so it's an honor always to be asked to lead those kinds of rituals and ceremonies, but they do take a different, they take on a different tone. When you're literally, like, I forget who it was, maybe it was Susan who mentioned, you are kind of stepping outside of yourself in that facilitator role, and you're not participating in the ritual yourself. You are simply holding that space for the couple or the family or the group to move through the ritual and guide and hold them and facilitate it for them. And I think that you get better at that as you go. A lot of these that, here in our community, if you look through our church handbook that's downloadable on our website, a lot of these rituals and ceremonies we've just made up, and the handbook itself needs a revised edition because these rituals evolve over time. You do them 10 times, and then a piece of it you maybe realize, well, I think I want to switch. That doesn't kind of feel natural there. It doesn't flow, and I think we should switch these two parts, and I think there really needs to be something in the beginning that kind of just, gets everybody resonating and humming, and maybe we just do a rolling om in the beginning, or there's a moment of silence. There's stuff that you only can find out by doing repeatedly, and so I think it's important to just put yourself out there as the leader or facilitator for these types of rituals, and let the rituals evolve, but let yourself evolve as a facilitator of them as well. There are medium-sized rituals, like 10 to 20 people, usually inward-facing, the circles like we lead at Integral Church, or, even the Wisdom Circles that Claudia leads here at Wisdom Circle. These are rituals too, going around and checking in. The church that Charles is leading in his living room, all of these groups that we're leading, there's elements of ritual to them as well. I think it's important for all of us to get in rooms like this together, even virtual rooms, and share our experiences with what we find. And then large rituals. This is your Catholic Mass, your even like we mentioned, Matthew Fox is now doing the Cosmic Mass, which is a twist on the Catholic Mass, but it's now for the 21st century, for the postmodern world. He's including DJs and VJs and dance music and video projection, and he's got altars at the four sides of the room, and so he's called in the four directions, and you've got four different faiths administering an interfaith communion and breaking bread together, and there's all kinds of different ways that you can build these larger, what are traditionally one-to-many rituals. You can build those out to be interfaith rituals as well. And so I want to just pause for a minute and ask again, are there any of these rituals that you have led? Is there anything that I've described that you have experience with or that you want to share, potentially around maybe some best practices, or maybe that a mistake or two you learned by, testing it in your own interfaith community? Are there rituals that you have in place that you want to describe to the group and share with us? Because I want to hear from you guys as well. I've done and led many of these myself and continue to do so, but they are constantly evolving, and I think it's incumbent on us to always be reading and researching and learning, just constantly learning. And being in the room with all of you is one way to do it. And so Susan has her hand up. Let's hear from Susan. Susan, what do you have to share?
It was funny. I always felt very like that I would never be able to figure out how to put together a ritual. And of course I grew up in the Catholic Church with huge amounts of ritual.
Yeah, you said it.
Yeah, I never even realized or thought of it as such. So I would put that whole thought together with trying to then pay attention to other religions, and the man who was the coordinating minister at the Interfaith Church when I first got there is a master at ritual, so I would really pay attention. Plus, I did get a chance to take a class with him, and he's not as good at teaching. Well, he was really a great teacher in that all of a sudden I walked away with just a much more confidence. I just didn't, I didn't see it happening at the same time during the class. But I had taken a class in anthropology, and I believe it was a thing that I had read about. They were talking about these people from this country and they were explaining their rituals, and they would, when they would get up in the morning, they would go into this room, and there was a pail of water, and they would look into the mirror, and they would, ritually wash their face, and then they would put the paints on their face, and then they would have the headdress, and they explained the way they were explaining it. You couldn't help but realize that's what we do every morning. It's what we do every night. We're always in ritual. For anybody who feels like, I couldn't put together a ritual, or that must be really very difficult, it's kind of like getting up in the morning, fixing your hair and putting your makeup on, or washing your face, whatever should happen, and getting yourself dressed. It's all ritual. And once I put all that together, now ritual is just figuring out how to just not have 5 things instead of 5,000 things that I want to include.
Right.
It's quite exciting. I tell you, once I read that thing and I thought, God, it's all ritual. I love it. But it's just intention. What is your intention? So if I don't have intention with what's my ritual, then I feel that thing that pulls it together. That was what I learned.
And was this a specific book you were reading, or something that was distributed in class, or do you remember what it was specifically that you read and learned that from?
The anthropology class was definitely the textbook, and I really do have to find that again, because I'll have to even type it up and send it to put it on the list, because it was it affected me so that it really made you think that here they even, it was really America spelled backwards, Nakarima or something like that. So the more you started to read it, the more you said, oh my God, this is them just explaining what it is we do in such detail. And it presented life in a way that was much more sacred in my mind. Once I realized that, and I compared it to something that I thought of with, African shamans or whatever it should happen to be, that's what we do all the time. I have to appreciate everything that I do as a ritual and bless it. So kind of like what you were saying, getting up and saying hello to the sun. Wow. What a blessing.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting to think about our daily, not just our daily spiritual practice, but our daily self-care practice as a ritual, whether it's in the shower or whether it's just if we're sitting and watching TV, how can we, just kind of honor ourselves and be present and, as we're, maybe massaging the kinks out of our forearms or whatever it is, just being present in our body and honoring the holiness in that moment, and being there. It's really interesting to think about things as ritual. It's funny to hear you describe your new understanding, kind of seeing the identifying with the word ritual differently. It's kind of when I went through the chaplaincy, I was kind of afraid of the word prayer. I didn't know how to pray. I wasn't comfortable with it. And then when I got into kind of the 1, 2, 3 of it all, the first, second, and third person perspective of spirit, spirit in action, and this is just the second person. This is just speaking to the ultimate thou, the ultimate other, and I do that every day anyway, whether I'm talking to myself or talking out loud or, it's prayer is something just we always do, especially in being in unity and having it be affirmative prayer, and in that practice, you're basically affirming your prayer is something that's already happened. It's already going to come to fruition. You're just affirming it and putting it out loud, So approaching prayer differently really helped me get a little more intimate with the practice and deepen my own prayer practice, just like you were saying, getting outside of yourself, taking a different perspective with ritual allows you to deepen your own practice with ritual in your life. I think it's important. Going through some of the ideas that we have for tools, these specific tools for creating ritual, I want to go back to Matthew Fox because as far as teachers go, I've had the honor and privilege to be in the room with that guy multiple times, and even as recently as it was October at the Parliament of the World's Religions, and the team asked me to hop up and puppeteer the big papier-mâché green man for the Cosmic Mass. So I was actually a little behind the scenes from one of the Cosmic Masses in Salt Lake City, which was just a supreme honor, and I got to hang out with the crew afterward as they sat down and, like I described, sat down and said, okay, well, this worked well, and, this is something they do all the time, but yet after the event, they sat down and said, this worked well, and this, we'll do this differently next time, and it was fascinating to kind of be in that space with them. But I've learned much from Matthew Fox by being in the room for many years and many of his lectures and workshops. He teaches you to really turn the mundane into something really special. He's taught us multiple times to take whatever reading or teaching or scripture and turn it into a mantra. I remember at one point we literally chanted the names of God together, whether it was Allah, Krishna, Mary, Shekinah, all these Amen, Buddha, there were Yahweh, all these words that had the word Ah in them. We were just chanting them over and over and over in unison as a room, and it was, similar to a rolling Om. There was something that happened, about halfway through, where you felt like one organism. You just felt so connected to everyone else in the room. Another thing that he taught us was to take something that, like I mentioned, if you're reading a book or you're reading a certain sacred text, taking a line from that sacred text and turning that into a specific chant or prayer or mantra. What we did was we were sitting upright, and we had our palms out, our hands out on our knees, palms up, and we said, what was it? The kingdom of God is within me. And we would tap our chest. And then we would say, the queendom of God is among us. And we would put our hands on our knees, palms up. And we would just repeat that in succession. The kingdom of God is within me. The queendom of God is among us. The kingdom of God is within me. The queendom of God is among us. And we would repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And you can take any line that you're currently reading in any book and turn that into a ritualized mantra. We've done that in circles at Integral Church. We take a reading or a piece of scripture and we've turned it into a mantra or a chant. It's a really fun way to get people on the same page, raise their level of religious literacy, get them familiar with a faith that they're maybe not familiar with in a kind of fun and interactive way. Interfaith altars are something that we build a lot of here. We take the altar kind of in the center of the circle, and we have, the head of the Buddha, and we have the cross and the crucifix, and we have Ganesh, and we have, I'm trying to think of what else we have in the altar. I have, it's funny, I have a joker, a playing card with a joker on it that I always put on my altar. It's the significance to me being the holy fool, right? Or going into this moment, this experience with beginner's mind. I forget the name of the man who invented jiu-jitsu and designed that system of martial art, but he insisted that when he died and was buried, he be buried in his white belt because he was moving on to the next world as a beginner, starting completely from scratch with beginner's mind. And so I always put the Joker card on the altar at our events to signify the level of mastery we can attain spiritually simply by getting out of our own way and sitting in beginner's mind. So all these pieces, you can, honor your birth medicine. Take a little picture of yourself as a baby and put that on your altar. Building altars, we could spend a whole 2 hours talking about building altars and designing altars. But interfaith altars are also really important, especially like I described earlier, when you've got a situation where it's a circle and people are coming to it for the first time. Might be a way for, if they just see a little bit of symbolism that they're familiar with, that they can kind of be a little more comfortable. We do a covenant group at a local UU church here for parents, and a really cool thing that they did the other day was they handed out little slips of paper to four of the participants plus the facilitator. And the facilitator read first, and then they went around the circle, and it was a way to call in the directions simply by having the participants themselves read from the paper. So the facilitator, I actually have them right here. The facilitator would read, "Spirit within, we invoke depth. May we remember all we value." And then the next person in the circle would read, "East, brother fire, we invoke warmth. May our hearts be open to each other." Just short little excerpts like this that you can provide for the participants in a circle to either establish the sacred space, a really easy way. They can just read this right off a little piece of paper or print it in your bulletin, and they can just have it right there in their hands. You could ask for volunteers to read. A really fun and interactive way to get people involved in the actual ceremony itself. What else? Is there any? Are there any other examples from people here that have designed? Claudia, you've mentioned you've done a bunch of weddings and memorials. I shared a little bit about my technique for interviewing couples ahead of time and getting that language and extracting the kind of the essence of what they want that ritual to feel like, right? That's always a question I ask them. What do you want the tone of the ceremony to be? Getting them to describe it in emotional language, get them to describe it in colors, get them to describe it in texture. It really helps me craft the language for them. And then memorial services too. So Claudia or somebody else, you want to share about your experience in designing weddings or memorial services. Claudia, go ahead.
Sure, I can share. I do much of the same, Joran. I sit for weddings with the couple, and one of the things I ask them, and I get some really cool answers, is first of all I ask, okay, tell me how you met, and when was the first time that you realized? What did you feel like the first time that you realized this is the person you wanted to spend the rest of your life with? And that really gets the conversation opened up, because many times they haven't even shared that with each other yet. Okay? Yeah, I remember that moment, that I knew that you were going to be and this is what it felt like for me.
Most times they remember it differently, very differently from one another, I'm sure.
Yes. And I do pretty much the same thing, where I really delve into what it is, how they want this day how they want to remember this day. I ask them that question too. How do you want to remember this day? What do you want to remember about it? Mm-hmm. When it comes to, the vows, I will ask them if they're comfortable with writing their own vows. And most people are now. Most people want to do their own vows now. But if not, then, we do something together where we sit down and write them together. As far as any other rituals within the wedding ritual itself, I will, if they don't have any particular ones in mind that they want to do, I'll go through several different ones with them and say, this is what this ritual is, what it means, what do you think would create that feeling of unity and oneness, not only between you two, but from the people that are there to celebrate with you. Mm-hmm. And for me, I think that's a very big piece of both weddings and memorial funerals, is creating that sense of we are here together. We are here as a collective, and getting people to actually feel that.
Yeah.
That's one of my biggest intentions. And I think it works pretty well because I have so many people following these ceremonies and rituals that I do that come up and tell me that was absolutely beautiful. Not the first participants, but people that just were in the audience, so to speak.
Right.
But talking with either the wedding couple or, in the case of a funeral, with the family of the bereaved or the family of the bereaved, I glean from them, like you said, try to pull on their emotions. What's their emotions around all this? And that then leads me in the direction of creating the ritual. So that's how I do it.
Cool. I see Charles has his hand up. I did want to respond to something Claudia said. It's funny, as we talk about the more we do these weddings and memorials and these different ceremonies, I had a couple ask me about, I think they had an idea, because I've done everything from the lighting a unity candle, where you take two candles and, you light the same, or lit from the same candle, or you combine sand into a vase, or I had one couple where we did a paint on, they had finger paint, and they put it on their hands, and then they put it on a blank canvas, and so their two hands formed, I think it was like in the shape of a heart or something, but it was their two hands together, and that was in lieu of sand or a candle or something like that. And I tell you what, there weren't enough wet wipes in the world to get the paint off of their hands so that we could continue on with the ceremony. It was probably the hardest dead air I've ever had to fill, as we and the bridal party, everybody dug in their purse for something to get their hands clean so that we could continue on with the ceremony, because we hadn't thought through and like, well, what do we do after we have paint all over our hands, you know? So we blew through a whole packet of wet wipes, and so I had a consult with a couple who said, well, what if we do, I forget what they mentioned, but it was something that was kind of messy, and I told them that story, and they were like, ooh, yeah, okay, maybe we won't do that. So it's a testament to the more of these we do, the more we learn from from our mistakes or from our blind spots. Charles has his hand up, so Charles, what is it that you wanted to share or ask?
Well, I did a wedding where it was going to be outdoors and everybody was going to be standing. And it ended up it was in the pouring rain. So the only ritual I did was exchanging of a rose. And it was such short ritual, it worked out fine. And so, I mean, you couldn't do the unity candle because, of course, it was outdoors, and there were so many other things you couldn't do. And I don't think, I know that they didn't care about being too religious, because the reason they selected me is because the city clerk couldn't do it because it was outside the city limits. But unrelated to that, I always do a communion. And
a what? Say that again.
I always have a communion in the services.
Okay.
And for New Year's, we gave out blowpipes and everybody blew on them.
What is a blowpipe?
Those things at the New Year's where you blow it out and.
Oh yeah. Oh cool.
Yeah, and it really worked out because everybody liked doing that. And for Thanksgiving, I gave out slips of paper with different things that we could be thankful for, and everybody had to pick one and read it.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, like I said, that's an easy way to get people involved. And a real easy way is to just read it off the page.
Well, and that's the idea. Everybody has to be involved, even a little bit, because otherwise they don't have they don't come away with much meaning because they're not that involved. I mean, that's really what the communion does in the Christian tradition.
Sure. That's the God moment, right? That's where you connect with God, connect with Spirit.
That's right. And otherwise, you're just an observer.
Right.
I like the blowpipe thing. Everybody liked that.
Well, we'll try those down here. I'll let you know how it goes. I'm sure they'll love it too. So anybody else have something to share about how they've built these interfaith rituals or ceremonies? I think it's interesting to hear the different kinds of groups that we've gathered, the different kinds of activities that we've tried. Has anybody tried something that didn't work and then had to change it up for the next time? I see Kathleen has her hand up. Let's see if it's another response to that question or to share something else. Kathleen?
Yes, hi. So the only ritual that I've actually actively participated in is a celebration of life or memorial. I do them a couple of times a year for the last couple of years at the nursing home where I work. And it first came out of what I do once a month, which is a hymn circle, where we just sit and we enjoy singing all of their favorite hymns. And we realized we really needed to kind of spend a portion of that time in celebration of people we knew that lived there that had died. And that became more of a full 1 hour celebration of life program that we do now, probably twice a year. What I did learn that will answer that last thing you asked was, because it came out of the hymn circle, we inserted a lot of music. And sometimes it just felt like it was too much. And you know, so that is one thing I learned after the first two, that we really needed to just let it be the celebration of life and hold that meeting, and then the next month go back to the hymn circle, you know, and let the two of them live apart from each other. And so I learned that. And the wonderful thing about doing these celebrations in the nursing home is, even though many of the people do have a Christian background, not all do. And to really look at the people we're celebrating and who they were and what their faith practices were, and incorporating an element of that into our celebration, and spending a moment to explain where that's coming from, so that everybody can feel like they're a part of it and it doesn't feel separate from them. So that's
great. Yeah, no, the only time I've seen a lot of music work well in a memorial program was in a majority African American group that had a funeral for a memorial service for one of their pastors. And it was held at the Unity Church, but man, there was so much standing and singing, and I mean, it moved me to I wanted to help carry the casket out the front door in celebration of that life, you know. I mean, it was really special. I mean, it felt like a Mardi Gras parade at the end, you know, and it was amazing and so beautiful, you know, and that's a true celebration of life, you know. I mean, that was great to see it work, you know. But you're right, though, when you're trying to design the experience and, you know, you're trying new things, it's hard to know what's going to work and what's not going to work.
Right, and especially because this is about, at any time we could be looking at, in a 6-month span, 30 or 40 people, and to really be able to create a world that would have honored all of them, you know, is something we have to are constantly working on, and also being able to let the elders who are there participate, which is beautiful, and finding readings for them, and responsorial moments, so that everybody feels a piece of it. And it's really been a beautiful thing for them. They've really treasured knowing that this is something we do. You know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's beautiful.
Lots of
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Susan had her hand up next. Susan, what did you have to share?
You know, you just gave me a great idea when you were talking about the joy that was in the celebration of this man's life, and you were so caught up. And I remember watching the movie, an old movie from the 60s, Harold and Maude. And
Maude, I love that movie.
Yeah, and what I loved was that there she was. They used to both of them used to go to the funerals. And she always used that yellow umbrella.
That's right. That's right.
And I thought, you know what? Maybe I always wanted then to have, after that, I wanted to actually have one of those like New Orleans type of a funeral. And I thought maybe it would be a good exercise for me, if anybody wanted to do it at the same, too, but to write my own memorial service. You know, in that crazy kind of way that I would want people to enjoy themselves, because I don't want anybody wearing black or brown or navy blue, and I yellow and orange would be my favorite. White is fine. If it's raining, I like brightly colored umbrellas, or and I want that band to play everyone out of the cemetery. With the they can in with the dirge, but out with, when the saints go marching in, just have crazy, stuff. I want to do that because I want to leave them laughing, or you know, so you reminded me.
I love that, and I like the idea of the write your own eulogy as a class or a workshop. You know, I like that as an activity that you could do as a group. You know, as a different kind of vision boarding. You know, a different kind of visioning exercise. I love that. I think that would be really great.
So many possibilities. Thank you. That was a great
idea. Yeah, thank you. Claudia, you had your hand up next.
Yeah. What I wanted to say was, Kathleen just sparked something, and you too, Joran, in me. I think it's important not only to recognize maybe the religious significance of whoever you're creating a ritual for, but also the cultural background. Mm-hmm. Because that may or may not be religious, but
right.
It could just be cultural. And so the cultural background, I think, is very important too when creating ritual for a celebration or something for someone else. I just wanted to throw that in because you sparked that thought in me. So thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's along all ethnic lines. It's along, Italian or Greek or Jewish. It could be religiously Jewish or culturally Jewish. What is it that is the tradition or the culture of the family or the community that, that kind of needs to be present in the room, right? What is the tone that needs to be there? Yeah, absolutely. Always good questions to ask. What else? We're kind of getting to the end of the call, so if there's any last thoughts, last questions or comments, final thoughts, now's the time. If not, we can go around and just check out. We'll go around and hear from everybody again, if that's okay. If you don't want to share again, that's okay too. You can just say I pass or whatever. But I think at this point, since it is time to start wrapping up, we'll go around and hear from everybody again, and kind of let's hear from something that you really loved about the call, something that you'd like to change about the call going forward, say for next month, and then also something that you'll take with you from tonight's call that was really meaningful or personal for you. And let's see, Tammy, you want to hear, let's go in order on my screen here. Tammy, why don't you go first?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, you can. I know you can. Okay, thank you very much. I've been listening intently and taking notes. I'm very inspired. I think I will walk differently, knowing that ritual is in so many things that we do every day. And as we approach the springtime and the time of year where there are lots of weddings and ritual happening, I'm excited to step into that. So thank you for everybody. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your bits of wisdom tonight. I've learned a lot, so thank you. I am complete.
Yeah, I'm into that. Sandra, how about you? Take a break.
Sure.
Take a break from the notes.
Absolutely. Wow, I'm full. I can't not tell you how full I am. I loved everything that everyone had to say, and it's given me great insight for myself going forward into how to create and what things to be mindful of, and just really being even more conscious about that every breath is a ritual, every sip of water is a ritual, and truly being present with everything that is happening, everything that I do, and recognize the divine in all of it. And the repetition of that, whatever that is what grounds me. It's what really helps me to maintain my center so that I can be even more available for others around me in a much clearer way, in a much grander way in some cases, but for certain in a much more humble way. So I take with me all of this, all of everything, and I look forward to applying much of it. And I also look forward to seeing and or reading about what others are experiencing after our conversation tonight. And I am complete.
Thank you, Sandra. Let's see, Susan. Let's hear from you.
Thank you, Joran. Guess I'm speechless. I love ritual. I never really think I am until I start talking about it, and then I realize that there are times when I'm not being as mindful, and so this has helped to remind me again that everything is ritual, and so hopefully more of what it is I'm doing every day, I'll do it more mindfully as the ritual that it is, and just connecting in with all that is in a much more holy, loving way. So thank you, and I am complete.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susan. Charles, what about you? What did you love, or what would you change, and something you'll take away?
I too like the idea that there are many things that we do or ritual that we don't think about. So I'll certainly start thinking more about that. And I enjoyed hearing everybody's comments. And I don't want to say I'm complete, because who's ever complete? But I think
you could just say over. You could pretend you're using a CB, and you could just say over.
Over that. And thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Diane, how about you?
Thank you, everyone. I would just, I feel like this conversation has primed the pump, and for me, I haven't done a memorial for a few months, and tomorrow I'm going to speak with a woman who's actually dying, and her daughter, and to talk with her while she still has a week or two left about what she would like for her own memorial or celebration of life. So I'm just glad to be considering ritual and this whole topic. So I feel like it's just helping me prepare before I step into a conversation tomorrow. Thank you all, and good night.
Yeah. Thank you, Diane. Appreciate you being here. And Kathleen, let's hear from you next.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for doing this. And everybody, I think what I've learned about the call, something you said early on, that it's not just the ritual, but the whole planning of it that is ritual. And I really appreciated that, and it kind of felt very sweet. And also exploring Matthew Fox, because he's come up now a couple of times in my studies in recent months. So I'm going to actually look into some more of his journey and what he brings to interfaith. Also taking with me, just again remembering how meaningful rituals are, and I think I got that from so many of you who mentioned your joy in creating ritual, and I think I need to just really allow myself to just go there and just enjoy it. And maybe looking at other kinds of rituals I could do at the nursing home. And the only thing I change, and I don't know that I have any control over this, it's a technical thing. Sometimes the sound went off and I was missing things people were speaking about. And I don't know if it's my technological problem here or if everybody was having that problem. So, all right, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great feedback, and it may very well be some kind of connectivity problem on your end. It could be something with the software. We'll never know. But there will be there will be a recording of the call, so you can go online and re-listen to it again and hear what you missed.
Fantastic. Thank you, and thank you for typing. Thank you. I think it's Sandra, right?
Sandra, yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kathleen. And Claudia, last but not least, let's hear from you.
Well, I would just like to echo what everyone has said about becoming more mindful of the fact that everything we do every day is a ritual. And I think that when I become more mindful of that will help me in creating ritual, because it then will become a second nature. So I thank everyone who was on the call tonight and all of your ideas, and thank you, Joran, for your input on this too. I think I'm complete. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. This was a really great one. Again, I feel like I talked a lot tonight. It was a lot of me talking and not a lot of conversation. But it was, I hope that everybody learned a lot. I think that there is a lot to share and a lot to unpack when it comes to building and creating these experiences for people. And again, the handbook that I mentioned I was reading from and that is available for download or just for free. It's just a PDF. It's on the Integral Church website. If you guys care to check it out, you can go to integralchurch.org and click on the About Us where it says Integral Church St. Petersburg, and on the page there's our handbook for download. So if you want to get into some of the sample wedding ceremonies and sample memorial services and how we bless the wine before we do the fatherhood rite, and all of that stuff is in there in the handbook, as well as some sample prayers and mantras, all in a very interfaith and interreligious kind of context. So with some additional commentary on the importance of rituals. So I encourage you to check that out. And just very, very grateful to Claudia and Tammy and Sandra and the team here at Wisdom Circle Ministries, again, asking me to lead and facilitate these calls. The idea for these calls itself being something that spun out from all of us meeting and convening at the Parliament of the World's Religions many months ago. And it was just a really, really great thing to see all of this come to fruition and become a reality and start to see real connections being made. And so I want to have everybody just kind of close tonight by taking a deep breath in with me and letting it out. We've done a lot of listening tonight, and I just want to take a minute to honor that connection, that input, output, that relationship to other that was able to kind of unfold and blossom here tonight as the relationship continued to deepen among all of us as leaders in the interfaith movement, as activists and chaplains and facilitators and coaches and healers and ministers, all of us out in our communities, making those connections with people, and it all coming back to root and really take root in some really, really fertile soil that we're cultivating here on this call with each other. Honoring that moment, I would like to close out with the integral prayer, with the integral dedication that we close all our services with. And that is, may our consciousness and our behavior be of benefit to all beings in all places, liberating all into the reality of this and every moment. Amen. And so it is. And namaste to all of you. And thank you all for being here. And I wish you all a good night. And thank you for being here with everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Have a good night. Blessings to you all.
Good night. Thank you.